The Aldani heist is complete, and it didn't disappoint. This episode of the Star Wars Andor series, episode 6, felt more like Star Wars than the rest of the series has. That isn't saying the other Andor episodes didn't feel like Star Wars. This one was just a little more so. And I'll get into why in just a little bit. But if you're new here and Star Wars is your thing, then you've come to the right place because that's all I talk about. So hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications to join our growing community. And share the video with some friends with a message that says, yo, this guy is not whack. Now, on with the topic. Star Wars Andor Episode 6, titled The Eye, had a lot going on. I'll get to the I told you so stuff as well as the I was wrong stuff in just a little bit as well. At first, I felt like they were going to drag out the Aldani heist to another episode. Why? Because the beginning seemed like more tension building, similar to episode 5, but it came through. The buildup of the episodes prior were definitely worth it for this moment. As I liked the previous Andor episodes, this one was the one I was waiting for. I'm sure you were too. The biggest takeaway I have from this episode is that we see TIE fighter pilots in a different way than we have in live action before. Generally, TIE fighter pilots have been shown as static and almost non-human, robotic movements of a turn of a dial, and that's about it. That isn't included in the animated series, Star Wars Rebels. But in this, we see them actually have a glint of humanity, inside views of the cockpits as they prepare for battle, and how they board their Imperial war machines was a nice touch. It reminded me a lot of my Navy days, watching FA-18 and F-14 pilots preparing for their missions, then catapulted off the flight deck of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. If you want a Star Wars reference, then look at A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, when the X-Wing pilots were preparing for battle. The sense of urgency and duty was present, and the Imperial pilots showed it from the other side in this episode of Andor. It was a moment for me as a Star Wars fan longing to see the other side be more human. Remember, these pilots are men and women fighting for what they believe in. Peace. Not some Sith doctrine or way of life, and definitely not feeling like they're on the side of evil. I know we're shown the perspective that the Rebel Alliance was all good and the Empire was all bad, even from the earliest of Star Wars stories, but that line has been blurred now, especially in the fact that it showed the Aldani Imperial Commandant as having a family that loves and supports one another, and he wasn't shown as a militaristic father who demanded excellence from his wife and son, but rather acting that way to benefit them. If all went well, they would be transferred to a more preferred post. He showed his humanity with his wife and son when they were held at gunpoint, and threatening the lives of civilians put a dark stain on the rebellion. The reintroduction of the Imperial DLT-19 Heavy Blaster was also another great addition that gave the episode a real Star Wars feel. Built off a German World War II MG-34, the DLT-19 has become a fan favorite in the Star Wars universe. So, with the TIE fighters, the Imperial officer uniforms, and the DLT-19, this episode was definitely Star Wars. Now, on to the I told you so moments and the small arc I didn't see coming. The second part I should have seen coming. It was so obvious, but what can you do? As the heist progressed into its climax, I thought, sweet, none of my predictions were coming to pass. Why is it sweet? Because the less I can predict, the more surprising the story is for me. I like when I'm wrong as much as when I'm right. And I'm not a pompous windbag when it comes to Star Wars, and I don't curse the franchise for my expectations being subverted. But this is one case where I was mostly right. When Andor Episode 5 was released, I made a prediction video that the heist would entail the deaths of some of the Aldani rebels. The biggest I mentioned was Karis Nemec. You know, the young lad who was seemingly on his first mission. Well, he was injured. I thought, cool, he's going to make it. But yeah, he died of his wounds on the operating table. It was heartbreaking. They drug his decline out farther than I thought they would, but it benefited the character so much more. His death was unceremonious, other than Cassian Andor interrupting the grieving process. It was like, there's Star Wars fanatic, you get your moment. Now shut up and move on. which I did. The next character I saw being killed off was Arvel Skeen. You know, the rebel who didn't trust Cassian Andor and held a knife to his throat. I figured he would be killed during the action of the heist by an Imperial, but I was wrong. As he was killed, it wasn't by Imperial troops. Spoiler warning, no. Cassian Andor killed him when propositioned to run away with the money, thus showing us that Cassian isn't afraid to kill in order to preserve himself, his dignity, and his honor. We saw this in Rogue One as well, when Cassian Andor killed the informant when we first meet him. But I'll say I was mostly right about this prediction, because I said Skeen would die, and he did. In all, I predicted that most of the rebels would perish, and they did. The only ones to remain were Cassian Andor, Vel Sartha, and Lieutenant Gorn. Well, they surprised me. I'm sad to say Lieutenant Gorn didn't make it. Yes, I'm saddened by this. Not because I was wrong about him, but because I thought they had a real moment to make up for Finn's lackluster story in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Let me explain. He was an Imperial turned rebel. We haven't seen many of those in the live-action iterations of Star Wars. Yeah, Star Wars Rebels was littered with it, but I'm talking about live action. Lieutenant Gorn's motives were pure. He wanted revenge for the Donnie girl he fell in love with, but she was killed by the Empire. It's reason enough to continue his character. It's a tragedy that they killed him off unceremoniously, but that's how death is in real life sometimes. Now, he can be with his beloved. Cinta Kaz survived. I didn't see this coming. I thought it would be a great motivation for Vel to continue on to the bigger Rebel Alliance had Cinta died. But she was left on the planet when the rebels escaped the Aldhani Imperial garrison. So it'll be interesting to see what her character gets up to if they show that. Maybe Vel will return for her one day. That's likely. In all, Episode 6, the Andor series, was spectacular. There's so much in this episode, it's hard to take it all in with just one viewing. Now I feel like the first half of the season has culminated into something worth binging. Not that the other episodes are bad, they are quite good and show the grittiness of war, not just the victory and shininess. It's dirty on both sides, but good must triumph. But I ask again, which group is actually good? The rebels with a blurred line of right and wrong, or is it the Imperials holding duty and honor above all else, also with a blurred line between right and wrong? Both sides have their atrocities, and as we know, the New Republic became just as corrupt as the Republic of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, just as twisted, just before Palpatine took over as Chancellor, and the New Republic was mostly created by former rebels. I'm really excited to see what the second half of the Star Wars Andor series brings to the table. I presume Cassian will take his earnings back to Ferrix, where he will find the growing presence of the Empire. I'm eager to find out who Luthen Rael is and what the hidden object was that he was staring at the end of the episode. Anybody catch that? Overall, this episode was so good. For a series I wasn't so thrilled about when it was announced, yeah, I'm full throttle on it now. This is Gerald from Star Wars Fanatics signing off, wishing you all great health, happiness, and peace. Thank you all for watching, and remember, this is the way, the only way.